is this performance in which Piastri came second, I think Norris came fifth or so, ahead of Hamilton. Is this a sign that things are back in order for McLaren and they could be second best team, maybe even challenge Mercedes? I think that's jumping the ball because Piastri definitely he beat Russell, so they may not be able to challenge Mercedes. But if things go wrong for Mercedes, Mercedes has bad starts or has a bad day, we could see McLaren win a race this year. And I think we could say that right now they're in good shape to be the second best team on the grid if they can keep this type of performance that they had here this week. Coming into the future races, and I think they can, and that's what we're going to talk about this race twofold: how they were able to do well at the race at Suzuka, and why we think this is systematic of a team that has better race pace than Ferrari, and therefore will be able to beat Ferrari. So let's start with the race. As usual, the Ferraris have a good start. They come up from P4 and P6 to I think P3 and P4, something like that. They both start well. They both outstart Russell. No surprises with that. Well, the real surprise was that Piastri jumped out ahead of everybody. We're not going to go into why Piastri's start was so great. We're going to look more at why he was able to maintain and come second in this race. But let's go back to Ferrari. Ferrari has shown over and over this year fantastic start. They have a small turbo, a good weight to turbo ratio that gives them fast starts like Mercedes. Like I mean, not like Mercedes, like our motorcycles. They go well through the corners, and early in the race, they sort of race with teams. But they sort of race with Mercedes, but as usual, whether it's Mercedes or McLaren, the longer the race goes on, the more they start to struggle because they do well on corners, but they just don't get enough of a dump of energy on the straights because their ERS energy recovery system is just not as good as Mercedes. Straight up, that's why I don't think they can beat Mercedes. And now they're struggling with McLaren in racing, and McLaren is passing them. Now I'm going to argue that McLaren is passing them on the straights, even though they do better than McLaren on the corners, because McLaren also dumps a lot of energy. Because even if McLaren may not have the ERS the Ferrari has, they still have the same ICE and battery, so they're getting a tremendous amount of power on the straights. And now that they've trimmed the weight of their car in the third race, the car is lighter, so now that even helps for the advantage of dumping power on the straights. So that's why they're beating Ferrari. Ferrari has better traction than McLaren, probably. They probably have better grip and speed through the corners. But McLaren has a Mercedes engine with a ton of power, and McLaren has lost weight. They've trimmed their car down and done a better job of integrating the chassis and body with that powerful engine. So now they're turning the corner, and we know they're going to continue sculpting that car the way McLaren does with methodically building, bringing upgrades. And as far as I'm concerned, you're going to see McLaren beating Ferrari a lot more. So I'm going to now demote Ferrari to third. All of this being said, we still have to give credit to Leclerc for pushing that car and coming third in this race on the podium ahead of Norris. But what we're seeing with the telemetry is that McLaren is getting a lot more dump of energy on the straight. I don't know if their ERS is as good or bad as Ferrari. It doesn't matter. But the main thing is they've got that powerful engine. And we know F1 now is a straight sport, not a corner sport. So unless Ferrari can start to make some changes in their straight line speed and in their deployment and in their ERS, they're probably going to be doomed to third best on the grid, get some podiums and whatnot. And they'll be fighting McLaren for third or second best on the grid. What are your thoughts, Ferrari?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. McLaren has really done well in this particular race. I think this one singular tweak that they did to the car is the lowering of the weight reduction. I mean,
Yeah.
this helps them to better integrate the power unit with the whole of the car. So they're using the Mercedes power unit, and by reducing the weight of the car, this has really helped them, especially in the straight line speed. You know, they can now begin to match, but not quite the same pace, but at least they can begin to match Mercedes on especially on the 130R. So basically, what they have done is while they have the straight line speed, they I don't think they have the consistent ERS deployment of Mercedes themselves. Although
Yeah.
the Piastri was reasonably competitive at entries into the corners, but the car still showed some deficit. And maybe it was caused by a minor wheel spin or something, but there seems to be some deficit in energy deployment compared to Mercedes. But it's certainly an improvement from China. China was rather very embarrassing for McLaren, but they've come back with just minor tweaks, and the car looks closer to the performance of the Mercedes power unit, albeit still falling short in the deployment area, which Mercedes is head and shoulders above every other person. I think Piastri had a good race. Even
So let's look at it. They have this. They have almost the same hardware. What I mean by almost, they have the same engine and battery. There's some slightly differences. I think there's some slight differences with the what is it? The gear shifter. I mean the gear, the stick, the shifting and whatever. But in general, they have about the same. But the main difference is that hardware is also the body of the car. Mercedes, once again, they did tons of research while McLaren was winning championships and fighting Verstappen. They were busy on integrating everything, integrating the software, which is the algorithm and the software, with the electrical systems and the battery, with the IC, which comes together with the battery, and with the body of the car. So they have everything. But what we're seeing is that McLaren has the same power unit, except for the gearbox. Like I was trying to say gear shift, or the gearbox. They have the same power unit, so they're going to get the same amount of raw power that you can get from the ICE and the battery. But there will be differences in the software between Mercedes and McLaren. But I believe McLaren is probably, with their resources, they're fine-tuning their software. They're fine-tuning, and the software is going to determine how they map out the energy throughout the whole lap. And in a lot of ways, Piastri looked to be more efficient on this track than the Mercedes drivers, especially than Russell. Russell was not efficient on this track. So those are the first signs that they're getting a good ERS mapping. And within Mercedes itself, it looks like Antonelli's using a better mapping strategy than Russell. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with McLaren. But like I said, they still have that power that Mercedes has. It's just that Mercedes is able to, even when they drop one bomb on the straight, they're able to drop a lot more. But what's really important is that their ERS, as the laps go on and on and on, their endurance is better. But we have to question that because Piastri was able to come second and hold off Russell. Thanks a lot, though, probably due to the fact that Russell lost 10 seconds because he didn't do the pit stop. But let's look at the question in that if they hadn't had that safety car, would Piastri have beaten what's his name, Antonelli? Because